brokers. Welcome to another episode of Brokish, where we talk about the unbelievable ish this country has done to keep us broke. Now here are your hosts, Amber and Erika.
Hey y'all, I'm Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And today we are going back to Government 101. Schoolhouse Rocks time, y'all. Yes. Yes. Why you don't sound excited?
Well, I mean, I like school, Amber, but a lot of people don't like school. This is going to be boring.
No, it's not going to be boring. But, you know, we need to have a conversation about this government that we live under, because I think some of us are fundamentally mistaken about what it is and why it was created. And as a result, we waste a lot of time doing things like voting.
Amber, voting is an essential part of being in this society. Anyway,
that would never really, designed to be transformative politically or designed to create and push change. And so do with the information what you may, beloveds, in the words of our favorite prophetess, Iyanla. But we want to inform you today. So we're going to have just a little bit of civics lessons about what kind of government we have, why it was created, and who it was created to work for. And because the podcast is called Brokish, I don't think y'all are going to have to strain in your imaginations too hard to know that it probably wasn't us.
Spoiler alert.
I hate to ruin the movie.
So look, Amber, I'm looking at you and I'm like, you're very cute today. You're very professional today. What are you giving us? What is this look?
It's giving sis has to be in court at 11 o'clock. Okay. That's what it's giving. So, we record early in the morning, and Erika knows, I don't know if y'all know, I try to keep the secret, but y'all know I be struggling running a little bit late. So I woke up this morning after I got my kids off to school. I said, I'm going to get ready. Cause I can't be late to court. So, I got a hearing on a motion this morning. So I'm going to be super lawyer in a few hours. So, I had to be extra cute for the camera.
Okay, so I know some of y'all are listeners and not viewers, but I'll just let you know, Amber is very cute today.
Well, thank you. I do.
So have you been up to anything lately, or just, school starting and working?
Just school starting and working. I am a little tiny bit emotional because in a couple of days, I'm taking my oldest son for his first college visit. And I'm all in my feelings about it. We leave on Friday, and I just don't know how to feel about it, child. I'm just in my feelings. So we've been getting ready for that and, doing all that stuff. And I'm just not ready. I'm not ready.
So you telling the people where you're going? I'm not trying to get in your business. Don't put it in that.
Oh, no, it's not a secret. We are going to my alma mater. We're going down to Lubbock to Texas Tech. Guns up, suns up. It's wrecking time in Raider land. And so, yes, we are going to
That
visit.
Is the whitest thing you have ever said.
It is. But I'm gonna stick by it. I'm not gonna take it back. So yes, we are going to Lubbock. But the good news is we are visiting during TTU Black Alumni Weekend. So we're not just visiting on any old weekend. We're going during Black Alumni Weekend. So he can see the campus at its blackest. Am I bamboozling my child now that I say it out loud?
You know what? That sounds really, really bad. That boy is going to think that there will be, hordes of Black people there, and, there will be this community of Negroes, and it's just not going to happen.
No, we all leaving Sunday. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I'm just getting ready. We done bought tickets to the football game, got shirts and all of that stuff. So it's official. We're going on our first college visit.
Well, I'm excited. And you're talking about homecoming, Amber. So Your girl, I went to the University of Texas at Austin. We are having our Black homecoming this upcoming weekend. So when y'all listen to this, anybody from UT, you'll know when we were recording this. But Amber, the thing is that I'm a terrible alumni because am I supposed to say alumna? I'm the terrible person that went to I'm the terrible person that went to that school because I don't have a shirt. So we're like,
not one?
Out. Child. I have one Texas shirt that has sparkles on it from a long time ago. People used to wear sparkles in their clothes, and I'm not a sparkle auntie. I'm not going to do that. So I had to go out. I had to find me some tennis shoes that have some orange in them. I had to go get me a shirt, but then I have to have my AKA stuff. So then I had to get me some AKA tennis shoes, and then I got to get some AKA shirts. I'm just not ready for homecoming because I didn't know if I was going to go. So now
I thought UT was a whole cult. So I didn't know y'all didn't, I thought y'all's blood was orange.
All my other friends are ready. I'm just not ready because I wasn't planning on going. But anyway, I finished all my homework early, so now I can go to homecoming.
Yes, Doc. So this is so funny because I was watching Different World the other day and I thought about you. It was the episode where Dwayne was teaching his math class and everybody was complaining because he was doing it so hard and, being so hard on him. So Colonel Taylor had to come in, because I was like, oh, look at Erika trying to be hard on the kids,
You know what? I am... Well, I'm not going to talk about anything related to my employment on this show because I work for the state of Texas now. So I'm not going to say anything. Okay. So speaking of the state of Texas, this country, a lot of people think it is united, and these are the United States, Amber. But I am so glad that today you are here to deliver for us a civics lesson to take us back to the founding of the country, and also just to talk about how, at least in my opinion, so maybe you won't talk about it, but in my opinion, we're not really a country. We're just a bunch of little states independently doing whatever the heck they want to do.
I mean, yes, that's built into the sauce for sure. The idea of federalism is, yes, to intentionally keep a big chunk of the power decentralized amongst the states. But I do want to say before we start, yes, we gave y'all the spoiler alert, but the purpose is we don't want to depress nobody. We don't want to encourage anybody to disengage, but we want you to be engaged and empowered with knowledge so that you can make the best choices for you about how to expend your political capital and where to do it and how to advocate for you and your community and the people around you. So this is not a F politics manifesto or anything like that. This is just the more you know, the more intentional and strategic you can be about what you do and how you choose to do it. So I don't want nobody being like, they told me at Brokish, don't vote. I don't have to go to no meetings. No, we didn't. Mm-mm.
So Amber, when we were first talking about this show, why don't you give people insight into why you wanted to have this conversation?
So, I was doing what a lot of us do when we have downtime. I was scrolling on the gram and, on the Explore page, I ran across an interview that Tamika Mallory was doing. And one of the things that she was, listen, we are currently not expressing any opinion on Tamika Mallory. This is just, she was the inspiration. Okay.
But if you do want to hear my opinion, call me. But anyway, go ahead.
And so she was giving an interview at a radio station about why it was so important for us to vote. Like she was specifically talking in context about the George Floyd policing bill that was not being passed because it was being held up. And what she was saying was basically that the problem is that we don't vote enough and we don't vote consistently enough to create the kind of change and the kind of legislation and the kind of substantive agendas in Congress that we need to have in order to make a difference in our community. And while, that talking point is very familiar to all of us, and we've all heard it before, it really started making me think about the fact that so many of us are fundamentally misled about not only the power of the vote, but the very intentional ways that the people who founded this country intended to neuter and dilute our votes when they created this stacked system that they created. And so when I was talking to Erika, I was like, we need to talk about this because we got to stop yelling at each other about how we need to be voting out here and we trifling if we don't, because that ain't it. It's just factually a misstatement.
And I'm glad you want to talk about it because I do personally feel attacked. And I'm kind of serious when I say that. Like, it's everywhere you go. It's vote or die. It's all of these politicians bringing out all of these celebrities that I'm supposed to care about, telling me to vote. It's about people saying, your ancestors died for your right to vote. And there is just a lot of pressure for that single tool in the toolkit. But anyway, go ahead, Anne.
Yes. And even other things. Like I know I made a post on Instagram a few weeks ago when I was quoting Supreme Court cases and saying to people, like, do you know that it's not in the Constitution that the police have a duty to protect and serve you? And in fact, the Supreme Court has explicitly said they do not. And so many people were shocked, like, what? Well, why do we have police? So where do they come from? And I just think that so many of us are operating off of misinformation, truly believing that the government has all of these obligations to us that they do not have. And so this is a conversation that we need to go into.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Yes. So, I mean, we don't have to stay, in the beginning for a long time. I think most of us learn in school at some point that obviously we have a nation that was created because we are a group of people who were founded by folks who had beef with Great Britain, right? And the irony of representative government, right? The irony of demanding a government that is willing to help you when you're doing something that is difficult to do or doing something as opposed to other people. It's so ironic because we talk about those things now like it's negative, but a lot of those very issues led to the founding of our country. So you had a bunch of people kind of in the middle. Like, y'all know Britain is a monarchy, so they had a king, right? They didn't have no president, they didn't have no Congress, and them like that. They had a monarchy. And right under the monarchy are the real wealthy people. Like, you have your nobility, your elite wealthy people. And those are the people, obviously, because money enables and buttresses up power. Those are the people that the government was primarily responsive to. And so then you had the people in the middle, people that ain't poor, but they're not doing that great either. You got people like lawyers, because lawyers wasn't that wealthy. They embarrassed. Got people like bookmakers and store owners. And our founders were a lot of middle-class people who resented the fact that they didn't have the same access to government, that they didn't have the same financial means as the people who got all the attention from the government. And so one of the ways they decided to try to deal with that was to come to the new world, which is not new, which they did not discover.
Right.
We already know that. So they get here. And of course, it takes money to create structure. It creates money to create infrastructure. And a lot of the people who came here resented the fact that Britain was like, we don't really want to invest a lot of money in this. Like, we believe in y'all, but we don't believe in y'all like where we want to put our money where our mouth is. And so a lot of the founders resented that. They resented the fact that they didn't get no handout and no pull up, that they had to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Like, imagine being angry about that. But yes, a lot of them were. And of course, the crown was taxing, even though they wasn't helping. And that also infuriated a lot of people. It's like, y'all love to tax us, but y'all don't want to help us build no roads. And they felt like they were being taxed in an unfair way. They didn't have any say in it. So we know about the Boston Tea Party and all of that. And so really, we can condense the story.
I just feel like not much has changed.
I mean,
I'm still feeling like Nobody wants to give me help. They telling me to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. Like the infrastructure is poor in places that need better infrastructure. People getting taxed that don't get nothing. Hello, Puerto Rico and Washington D.C. It's all very
No.
interesting.
Except we're not allowed to complain, right? Because the people who threw the tea in the Boston port, they're heroes, right? Because they had the nerves to fight back against being taxed without representation. And we laud our founders as visionary people because they could see something here that obviously the British crown could not. But when we stand up and say, "Hey, we pay taxes. Could you fix our roads? Hey, our taxes fund the police. Could you pass legislation that makes it difficult for them to kill us without any type of legal consequence?" They say we're complaining. They say we're being not patriotic. And they say that we are demanding handouts from the government, when really that same spirit that's driving the complaints that a lot of us make represent the same spirit that led to the founding of this nation, right?
Okay.
Yes. So anyway, so we get to a point where, and of course, like I said, this happens over a period of time. You have a lot of stuff brewing that is pointing to the fact that there is eventually going to be a war between the colonists and Britain. As early as the 1700s, Shays Rebellion, the Boston Tea Party, you have all of this stuff. The writing is on the wall. It's only a matter of time. And there are several attempts made to sort of create some unity, because to the point you made, Erika, about this being just sort of a little cross patch of states. We started with the Articles of Confederation, which was basically like a gang pledge, like you do you, I'ma do me, but I watch out for you, you watch out for me. But it didn't work. So they came back and they had a constitutional convention. There were 3 of them. But during those conventions, um, the Constitution was drafted. And I have to tell you that a lot of us believe that this was a situation where you had this great unity of people coming together,
Sure.
fighting for liberty. But the reality of it is that these were, and I don't say this pejoratively, I say this just as a matter of fact, these were a bunch of white men who wanted more power for themselves, not anybody else, but they were in an alliance of necessity because they didn't even like each other and they didn't even trust each other and they didn't even have unifying interests. And so when we talk about why we don't see frameworks of collective care and communal concern in America, it is because individualism, looking out for yourself, alliances of convenience are literally in the DNA of how we came to be a country. Anybody, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, one quick thing, Amber. As you were talking about them getting together, not trusting each other, unfortunately, in my mind, I started to think about the movies I've seen in terms of like Italian mobsters or like Colombian cartels. And I shocked myself because I'm like, that's the propaganda that we've been given about people who are the real gangsters in society, right? It's those people getting together in rooms and saying, you get this territory and you get that territory, but it's not us, right? Like those are the gangsters who do that. But it sounds like what you're saying is that was the damn founders are the damn gangsters. Like that's what they're doing.
Yes. And you know what all of this was about? Again, spoiler alert, slavery.
No, nothing is about slavery because that happened so long ago. Like nothing is about slavery.
So the southern states, from the very beginning, literally from 1619, the economy in the South was built on enslavement. The land in the southern geographic portion, especially, remember, we're talking now about the 13 colonies. So we're talking about coastal land. So that land on the southern coast was ripe for stuff like rice, peanuts, and then into Virginia, you got cotton. And so these industries are driving the business in the North, because remember, there's not a lot of enslavement in the North. There are some pockets of enslavement. We don't talk about that, but there are some pockets. But by and large, the industry in the North is reluctantly, begrudgingly dependent upon slavery, because the insurance industry, what is New York Life insuring? Slaves. they're, they're
No.
they're insuring the bales of cotton that are being transported up and down the coast, the products that slave plantations are proliferating. You
Not
have a
JP
lot of
Morgan. No, not
you have a lot of importing and exporting going on the same ports, where like the port of Boston, where the Boston Tea Party occurred. Who is processing these commodities, right? And so there is this very uneasy relationship between the North and the South, because the Northerners are very clear that they don't want to enable the proliferation of slavery, not because they care about Black lives, but because they don't want to create an imbalance of power that allows the Southern states to have more economic influence and more political power than the people in the North whose industries are dependent on slavery. So a lot of
so.
that.
I'm interrupting
No,
you
go
again. I'm
ahead. Go ahead.
sorry.
No, it's just I was just about to say a lot of that is just that is in the sauce, right? That's in the sauce here.
The part that doesn't make sense to me is this notion of the North versus the South, because as you talked about and alluded to, there is no industry in the North without the slavery of the South. So how do they say that they are not interested in the institution when that's how you're being fed? I just don't understand it.
Well, because remember, we are creating a representative government, right? And so we're going to create a government that is representative of the people. And so what is the ways that we do that? And so the best way logically is to create a system based on population, right? And so as a result of enslavement, the South is substantially more populated than the North. So again, that's where that fear of an imbalance of political power comes from. So the North is like, well, y'all can't have it both ways. They can't be property when you are insuring them, right? When you are insuring your slaves, they can't be property. They can't be property when you are suing abolitionists for enabling and assisting them in running away. But now, when it's time to figure out how we create representative government, now you want them to be counted as people for a census purpose. So that's not fair. And that was a lot of the issue.
So you're not saying that the North was against the institution. You're just saying that the North was against the population of the South.
Correct. The North was against the advantages they felt that the South had in having more population. And so almost from the beginning, that was a concern. Like if you go back and look at some of the records of the constitutional conventions, the Connecticut Compromises talked about very early on, like this idea that if we admit a slave owning state, we're also going to have to admit a state that does not allow for slavery either. Because first of all, the white people were already planning to expand west to continue to pillage and plunder native and indigenous lands from the outset. There was an intent to expand westward off of the coast. But the concern was, how do we manage this issue of slavery? Because what we don't want to happen is for states that have enslaved people to be able to overtake politically the system and the government of the United States. And so you had a whole bunch of people in a room together who didn't trust each other and who were all interested in limiting the exertion of power by the other side. So this was never about creating freedom. This was never about creating liberty. This was about managing interests and creating a government with as many stops as possible to keep the other side from accumulating too much power. And by extension, to keep the people who literally were not in the room from interfering with what they were trying to do. So this had nothing to do with, let's create a system of governance that's responsive to the people, that is ran by the people, where government leaders are accountable to the people. That is not the kind of government we were trying to create.
So basically, their ancestors came from Britain, living under a monarchy, and dealing with the imbalances of power that existed there between the different segments of society, came here and said, okay, we don't like the idea of a monarchy. We want to have
Yeah.
some more independence. We're going to spread that independence around. But at the end of the day, we still don't want the people to have no power. Like, we want to make
Yes.
sure that we set it up so the people cannot come and try to overthrow us, have more money, more power than we do.
Yes, and that, I mean, really, that's the heart of the Connecticut Compromise. So the Connecticut Compromise is basically saying that we know that there are some people among us who want the states to keep all their power, right? The anti-federalists, the people who don't want a federal government because they are afraid that a big, heavy, top-laden structure is going to become Britain 2.0. And then there were people that are saying, well, child, listen, we got to have some order. We got to have a treasury that prints money. We got to have some system to have a military for the collective good. And while y'all worried about what's going to come next, if we admit a state here that has slavery or a state here that doesn't, the best way to deal with that is to create a system that incorporates both. So we will make sure that we have a federal government, but we will also limit. So we have what's called an enumerated constitution, which means that the powers of the government are expressly spelled out. Is not the government can do everything except this. No, it's if it doesn't list it, the government does not do it, which is one of the reasons why this idea of having protection from policing is squarely at odds, because it is not enumerated at all in the Constitution that the government has an obligation to create police forces that protect and serve you. And so
Well,
because that's not enumerated, the government doesn't have to do it.
so what other things are there? Other things like police that you can tell us that are not enumerated that we need to know about and we just assume?
Yeah,
Like, what else do
so
I think is there is not there?
so in addition to policing, like, a lot of people assume that they have a right to vote, like that is a right that is given to you, or like that it's enumerated that the right to vote has to be protected. So that is not true either. um there are legislative statutes like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Voting is not generally addressed in the Constitution in a specific way. So when we talk about a constitutional right to vote, we're talking about legislation that's been passed by Congress, right? Because a lot of people think that voting comes from the Constitution. It just lays out very generally that people who are in the Senate, and not the Senate, excuse me, because that comes later from an amendment as well, but people in the House of Representatives will be elected by the people. But there's no framework that says we're going to protect the right to vote, or this is what voting looks like. All of that is legislative. So that was determined by a body. And because it was determined by a body, it can be taken away by that body as well.
Hello,
Which is,
Florida and Texas
which
and
is
other
why
places.
the John Lewis Voting Rights Act was so important. Like, they were talking about the Civil Rights Act expiring. That was legislation. That was not constitutional. That was not something that flowed from an enumerated provision in the Constitution. That was a piece of law. And when it expired, that is why a lot of people were up in arms, like, we have to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, because they have allowed this landmark piece of legislation to expire. So a lot of people think that right comes from the Constitution. It does not. It comes from legislation.
Okay, so they don't have to protect us with a police force. And not that I'm asking them to protect me with a police force, but I'm just saying, in terms of what people think, we don't have a right to vote in the way that, in a constitutionally protected way.
Correct. That has been expounded on.
Anything else?
I think it's very interesting that we assume that the government was created to be directly accountable to the people, because we love to quote that part of the Declaration of Independence: government by the people, for the people. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough in our history is that the founders harbored a profound resentment and a profound distrust for what they consider to be common people. And again, it's so ironic that people who felt like they were being shut out of government because they didn't have enough money or enough privilege or enough status came over here and replicated that exact kind of government. So not only is the structure set up to balance out power between the states and the feds, it is also set up to intentionally make it difficult for common people to participate in government. So at every turn, the founders are
Meaning,
trying.
as to participate in government as a voter and a citizen, or as like a member of the legislative or executive or judicial branches of the government, or all of it?
Well, all of the above, but primarily as a citizen and as a member of the electorate who has political capital to hold these people accountable. So when
Okay.
this government was first created, the only position inside of the federal government that was directly elected by the people was the House of Representatives. Okay. And so the members of the House of Representatives were directly elected by the people.
Mhm.
The Senate at that time, senators were appointed based on policies and procedures set up inside of the states. The federal government, the executive branch, the electoral college was set up so that the electors ultimately cast the vote to determine who the president was. And how the electors cast their vote was based again on rules and procedures that were promulgated by the states. So, and then the Supreme Court was appointed by the executive branch. So at every turn, the will of the people was neutralized by a barrier set up to basically check their desire. They did not want a democracy. That, people, we talk about that a lot, about America's the greatest democracy. We are not a democracy. This is a Republican style government. This is a republic, a federalist republic. And those layers are meant to specifically undermine democratic rule. Okay. They did not trust the people. They did not trust that people had the capacity to do what was right for themselves. And so they very intentionally tried to create a government where it made it hard for people to be active in the highest levels.
So when I hear you talk, I was going in a couple of different directions. One of them was related to how you talk about how the people who came here and suffered under a certain regime and then come here and sort of replicate the same thing, but just with a different position in it. And that made me think about a lot of these Black Democrats that we have running major cities in this country. I feel like people get access to this power and then they become a part of the infrastructure and forget that they were once likely the people, and then forget all about it. And at this time, I'm not trying to place blame here, because I don't think that this blame can be placed at the local level exclusively. But if I think about Jackson, Mississippi, and if I think about the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, there is no way that you would have a capital city in a state that is the majority white and have a problem with water to the point where they're like, if you happen to have an open wound, which most of us, cut, scrapes, whatever, don't take a shower, please. Do not use this water to take a shower. Certainly do not drink it. And they have a Black mayor, a black mayor from a storied family. But I see other, my favorite Atlanta and, their former mayor and all those power plays. And I get very sad when I think about the Black people who are so interested in attaching themselves to this power structure to then deny rights to other Black people. And that drives me mad. And not that that's exclusive to us, of course it's not, but I'm saying that's the part that drives me mad, is when it's us. And then I just think about, in terms of the representation, how there is the propaganda in school about, yes, this country was built for the people. We are in like you said, this is the greatest democracy in the world. And all of those values, so called, that have been ingrained in us, and it's just not true. And I'm like, ooh,
Yeah,
propaganda
yeah.
is such a tool.
And I think it's doubly disappointing to see our people partake in that when the system is telling us that the propaganda we are partaking in is wrong. Like, you're telling people to hold on and be encouraged while there is a big ass water tank at the governor's mansion, making sure that him and his family and his staff have water.
Because he lives in
And
Jackson too, right?
you are, yes, he
Mhm.
lives in Jackson too. And
Mhm.
so you have a mayor going out here doing the dirty work, telling people to be encouraged and hold on and everything is going to be okay, playing in people's face while they got a literal tank parked in front of the governor's mansion. And I think that is a part of the dissonance that is frustrating and maddening, because you don't even have to go back 300 years. It's still happening. It's literally happening right down the street, where the government is showing you who it's designed to work for, whose interest is prioritizing, and you're still feeding people the same baloney. Because I guarantee you, there was a nursing home, there was a hospital, there was a school, there was somebody somewhere who was who could have used that water more than Tate Reeves and his family, who have multiple residences.
And and I don't want to get off track at all, but I was just thinking about, so I have a friend who lives in a suburb of Jackson, right? So when I first heard about all this, I'm calling her like, hey, what's going on here? And I mean suburb, like, and Jackson's not that big,
Right.
like, it's not a big place. So she lived 15 minutes from downtown, but in another city. She's like, no, girl, this is a white town. We're good. And I'm like, just all these surrounding areas, we're good. We are Gucci. But you,
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, outside
Mm-hmm.
of the state capital and all of that, and the governor's residences, y'all have a problem. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's another part of the problem when we decide to create representative government based on population. Mississippi obviously is a small state, and so they don't have the same amount of representation as Texas. Also ranks like it's either 48th, 49th, or 50th in the country when it comes to access to health care, right? When it comes to education, they're at the
Education.
bottom. And so you look at the types of repercussions you have from creating this government on, representation based on population. And this is a perfect example of who gets hosed by that, right? Who are the real people who are getting hosed by literally having no representatives who can advocate for them on a federal level, or who can even exert enough power to check. I mean, there was a story that came out about how the Mississippi government, you hear about Brett Favre taking like welfare money to do speeches he ain't never do. And, you know,
No.
yes. And
I
there's
mean,
like
I'm
three.
not saying no, like I don't believe you, because I believe. I'm just like I hadn't heard it.
So when we create systems that literally make it difficult to hold the states accountable, that is a problem. We all of us who lived in Texas, we saw the same thing with ERCOT when our grid failed last winter, and people were literally freezing to Texas death. Texas refuses to join the federal grid because it does not want to submit itself to regulatory oversight from the federal government in how it administers electric services. And so it's just another example of how this alleged decentralization of power for the benefit of the people is really just about helping a very few people maintain power and control without direct accountability to the people.
And so let's talk about the people then, Amber. They keep telling me that as a citizen, voting is what I do. Like, how does voting, what is the purpose of voting? What do I get from it?
Well, I think a lot of us talk about voting the way we do because we get a very emotional payout from voting. We feel good We feel like we fulfill the obligation that we've been propagandized to believe that we have, that keeps our government running. But I think even, and there's a lot, and some of it will be in the receipts, but there's actually been a lot of research done that talks about how, by and large, individual votes very rarely make any material difference in elections. They make very little material difference in legislative agendas, because we are a system that is so fueled by finances, money. Money runs our politics. And so you can vote. You can absolutely vote if you want to. We are not trying to tell you not to vote, but we do want you to know the reality of the significance of your vote, so you can also decide whether you want to get involved in other ways.
And
There was
is the significance, or sorry, Amber, I was just going to ask, can you talk about the significance of voting on the different levels? Because I do think that that's
yes.
true.
Yeah, so there's a saying that's perfect, because I was just about to say there's a saying that all politics is local. And so obviously in a system that's meant to have decentralized power, the closer you are to the ground, the bigger the difference your vote makes. And it is no accident that we aren't taught that. The last time I went to vote in my municipal elections, the lady told me that I was vote number 99, and they were going to have cookies when 100 people voted. And so not even 100 people had voted yet. And I went to vote.
And Amber told us she's not on time. She told us she was ever early.
Yes. So I was voting in the afternoon. That lady said 99 people had voted all day long. And I don't think there's an accident that we have been misled to believe that all of our power should be about who's the president, who's the senator, who's the representative. All politics are local. And so if you really want to maximize your political capital, get involved in your school board, get involved in your city councils or your municipal councils, get involved in your HOA. You know, you have to be on the ground, and the closer you are to the ground, the more meaningful the political power is and the political capital is that you have.
And you're talking about the school boards, especially just over the past few years, in terms of all the things that have been happening or not happening around critical race theory, because it's not about critical race theory, but we've just seen how certain people in our society know how it works, and they know what voting at the local level does, and they know how they're able to exert their power. And I just feel like because we have been propagandized around vote for the president, that we have really missed it there. And so I do think that there is a very big opportunity. So again, I'm always voting. Whenever there's an election down there by the library, Erika is there voting. So we are not here telling you not to vote. I'm just saying that, first of all, I'm not voting for all these ragged people y'all telling me to vote for because they're Democrat, because I don't trust a lot of them. And so in some cases, I might be voting the Green Party, or I might abstain from a certain type of election. But that's because I'm not informed or because I don't care, but because I'm not going to give my vote to somebody that ain't going to give me nothing back because my mama told me that.
I know that's right. And
I think
also,
she was talking about boys, though, but I use it when it comes to voting.
but we're going to apply it broadly across the board.
Yes.
And also remember, they tell you vote or die, you know, like once you voted, you know, your salvation is secure. Your name is in the Lamb's Book of Life. Like, it is vote and do other things as well. Like, volunteer. You know, a lot of cities are starting citizen civilian police oversight boards. And I've heard, particularly from a lot of my friends who still work in the DA's office and district attorney's offices, they are struggling to get people. Like, imagine the fact that we're not talking about that because they're not advertising it. There's a reason. You know, call your local municipality and ask, hey, is there a civilian police oversight board? How can I get involved? Is there an application? When is the next time? Get training as an election worker or a poll worker. Like, these are the things that they don't talk to us about. And again, in a system that's designed to shut us out, none of that is going to make the revolutionary difference that we needed to make. You know, we can talk about revolution, but just know that you don't have to fall for the banana in the tailpipe that if you voted, you've done your part. Because that's, of all the things you can do, probably the least effective one.
And the revolution is not going to take place at the polls. Like, if we don't know nothing else, if you don't walk away with nothing else from this, know that the revolution does not happen at the polls. Like, it is not going to be legislated. It is not going to be voted upon. That's not how it works.
And you can't revolutionize within the system. I mean, at the end of the day, what is happening, we talk a lot about a broken system, but the difficult truth we don't like to tell is that our system is not broken. It's working exactly the way it was designed to work. And that is why civics lessons like this are so vitally important. We do not have a Second Amendment because you have a right to bear arms. We have a Second Amendment because the Southern states wanted to create their own militias to go catch their runaway slaves because they didn't believe the federal government would allow the federal militia to do it for them because the North was antagonistic to slavery. So when you know things like that, yes, you approach things differently. This was not about you having a First Amendment right to say whatever you wanted or worship how you wanted. This was about Southern people being afraid that anti-slavery propaganda would overtake the day in the United States. And they wanted an express right to be able to say what they wanted to say, to make sure that they could still promote the virtues and the values and the economic benefits of slavery and not be shut down by the federal government while doing so. So when you know things like that, you realize that this didn't have nothing to do with you. This is not about you. So you can't revolutionize within a system that did not have you in mind. Point blank and period.
And Amber, after that, I don't even know where else to go, girl, because I feel like you, and it's not like I got no gun. I've been thinking about it lately, though, but I don't have one. But I'm like, I have a right. And Amber's like, well, actually.
It was not until 2008 when the Supreme Court first construed the Second Amendment to mean that. In 1909, when this case came up before the Supreme Court, it was Miller versus the United States. It was very clear that everybody was on the same page. This amendment does not confer an individual right because the amendment was clearly created to make the South feel better so that each state could have their own army and protect their own slaves. And coincidentally, it was expensive because only the wealthiest plantations could hire their own private police forces. That's where the police come from. So it was big private plantations that were hiring private armies to make sure that their slaves were not running away, and to also go and chase the ones who did and antagonize abolitionists, be like, stay away from here, because if you come around here, we're going to shoot you. So that is how private policing was first iterated in the United States. And Boston was the first city to have a municipal police force. And the purpose of that was to squelch labor revolts and to maintain order, which was French for maintain race relationships and keep Black people from protesting. And it was also to protect the commercial interest of the wealthy because they were afraid of labor uprisings. That is where the police come from. But
so really, literally ain't nothing changed. All roads lead to slavery and everything has been made to keep us all in line.
Yes, y'all thought that y'all had a Fourth Amendment right against search and seizure because the government cared about you. Southerners did not want the Northerners in their house, okay? Because it was almost from the beginning very clear that this little union we had was flimsy, okay? So they wanted to be able to have a stopgap from their homes being searched, from, the government being able to intrude on their personal space if there was ever a beef that arose about the issue of slavery. Same thing with quartering militia in people's houses. They did not want to have to take care of Northern troops who were fighting against them if something ever happened. Y'all, you can't have no revolution in something that's working exactly the way it's supposed to be working. That's all I'm trying to tell you.
Well, amen and ashe for that, Amber. So at this point, Amber, I feel like the homework needs to be we all need to go back to school. But I know you got something else for the people, though. Like, I don't know where to go from here.
Listen, so I personally think that we all need to start thinking about revolution in a different way. And so we have placed some information in the receipts for you all. And so the homework is to read Bell Hooks. Okay, Bell Hooks wrote a phenomenal book called "Where We Stand, Class Matters." It's to this day one of my favorite books. And she is talking about basically how our country has gone on a very intentional marketing campaign to distort class lines to increase the capital of whiteness, and how we need to be more intentional about thinking about the ways that money and race work together and being more cognizant of class, and whether that is the way to revolutionize. And you don't necessarily have to agree with it, but I think it is interesting. It's less than 200 pages. So we're going to put a link to where you can purchase it. And I ain't never going to get y'all that much homework again. Sorry.
You're not going to get no complaints from me, Amber.
I know, Dwayne.
The people,
I know.
Look, it's a lot of work we got to do. You just finished telling us how we got a lot of unlearning, new learning to do. So, hey, get on and get left.
Well, that's true. That's true. And listen, if you can learn in 200 pages, to God be the glory.
And you can. So, y'all, if this lesson hasn't taught us anything, we've seen this double consciousness that W.B. Du Bois talked about. We live in this country and absorb all of the propaganda about how we're protected by a certain set of laws set forth since the country's founding. The problem is that the laws never had us in mind. So we have to learn how to navigate in a system that claims we're citizens on one hand and is intent upon killing us on the other. And in a world of book bannings, a refusal to teach history, we know the rights that we're supposed to have, and we have to fight like hell to keep them from being stolen from us, like everything else we've been promised. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.